This guy's name is Mark. Mark accidentally opened the family heirloom notebook, and the next second he was lost in a strange space. Giant stone pillars rose straight up to the sky. The surroundings were desolate and ruined, with dried corpses hanging everywhere. However, Mark accidentally activated the mechanism, and a sudden roar immediately rang out. Seeing this, Mark also hurriedly hid behind the wall. Mark saw a giant monster appear. Mark anxiously observed and carefully retreated. Unfortunately, Mark activated another mechanism, causing the monster to turn around and quickly rush towards Mark. Mark tried to run away as fast as he could, but he fell into a trap. There were piles of bones there. Before Mark could escape, the monster stopped right in front of him. After a roar, the monster raised its axe high and slashed down. Mark woke up from the nightmare and realized that it was all just a dream. But why was it so strangely real? These strange things happened 10 years ago when Mark was still a child. Mark's father rushed into the room and was so scared that he wanted to take his son away. When he went out, Mark's father did not forget to break a piece of porcelain and took out the notebook and gave it to his older brother to keep. Suddenly, from a hidden corner, it seemed like a creature was poking its head out. Mark's father quickly took his two sons to escape, but his wife stopped him and insisted that it was all just his hallucinations. There was no monster chasing them, but the father did not want to listen and quickly reversed the car and was about to hit his wife. Luckily, he still retained some of his sanity. Mark was still young at that time, so he did not understand what was going on and just looked at his father. But suddenly, Mark's father's head suddenly caught fire. Mark suddenly woke up again. The dream that seemed so real just now made him a little panicked. Today, the brother came to Mark and said that he was old enough to read this family heirloom. The first page had the signatures of all the ancestors. Just signing here would make him a guardian of the Black Tower and fight monsters together. Mark didn't believe it and thought it was all just his father's illusion. There was no such thing as a strange tower. Mark's brother didn't want to explain much and just asked Mark to sign and take this book home to read. Then, in order to verify the truth of the story, it led to the scene in the beginning. Now, Mark had begun to doubt life. The next day after school, he went to his brother to ask. Unexpectedly, Thomas was not surprised at all and declared that he would show Mark real monsters. The two of them quickly arrived at a place built by their ancestors as a secret base. This place was said to be used with magic to protect sacred objects. However, Thomas never found any relic. Thomas hoped that Mark would be able to find it when he matured. As soon as Thomas finished speaking, a needle popped out of the box and stabbed him. Immediately, a wooden board on the floor opened and the relic appeared. The strange thing was that it only responded to Mark. It moved in Mark's hand as if it had found its true owner. This was the only weapon that could defeat the legendary monster. Suddenly, thunder rumbled outside. The stone demon statue suddenly moved. When the two were about to leave, the demon statue blocked their way. Thomas wanted to fight, but Mark advised them to find another way. As soon as they got off the stairs, the demon statue disappeared. Immediately after that, the demon statue suddenly swooped down from the sky, blocking the two people's way and attacked them. In the midst of the crisis, another angel statue also began to awaken. Before the astonished eyes of the two people, the two stone statues slowly approached and immediately rushed at each other. At that moment, the two people quickly ran back into the house and hastily closed the door without thinking much. They quickly found a safe hiding place. Outside, it seemed that the angel was gradually losing to the devil. The door was continuously banged on. Could the two escape this disaster? Not knowing how much time had passed, when Mark gradually regained consciousness, he saw a man sitting on the ground. That person's whole body was burned. Unexpectedly, it was Mark's father. Mark stepped forward, but the next second, his father suddenly raised his hand towards him and continuously signaled for help. At this time, Mark woke up from his dream again and discovered that his brother was no longer there. Mark stepped outside, but he only saw that the stone demon statue had broken into pieces, and the angel statue had returned to its original position. The result is that good always triumphs over evil. Although it is all just personal speculation, Mark still bowed his head and silently thanked the statue. Then Mark went to the store to find Thomas, but he was still not there. Suddenly, a whispering voice came from the notebook, announcing that Thomas had gone to the Black Tower. Mark panicked and suspected that it was all an illusion. Then, he hurriedly went to his psychologist to tell doctor what had happened. The doctor advised Mark to find Thomas. Maybe that would solve the psychological shadow in Mark. However, Mark did not know that everything was part of this doctor's plot. Returning home, Mark opened the book again and found a map. On it were detailed records of the terrain of the Black Tower. While Mark was looking for clues about Thomas, a strange insect suddenly appeared. While Mark was still in a daze, he was already inside that strange space. At this moment, a blurry figure rushed over and knocked him to the ground. That person was none other than Thomas. Only then did Mark believe that the Break Tower, also known as the Black Tower, really existed. Thomas explained to Mark what was happening in this space. Thomas also told him to come here to kill monsters, because outside, Thomas was considered a lunatic, but here, he could become a hero, respected by everyone. But Mark just wanted to take Thomas home. But Thomas told Mark to return by himself through the magic portal. But Mark said that he did not use any magic portal. Thomas found it extremely hard to believe. Mark explained that at that time, he just wanted to find Thomas. When Mark opened the book, he was transported to this place. Thomas was completely surprised and realized that Mark was a time traveler. Maybe that's why the relic chose Mark as its owner. After a long night, the next morning when Mark woke up, Thomas immediately covered his mouth and signaled Mark to look to the right. The monsters in the Black Tower had discovered them. Taking advantage of the monsters' lack of vigilance, the two began to run away. But a group of monsters quickly chased after them. On the other side, Sarah was very worried about Mark, so she went to Becky to ask for help investigating why Mark had become so isolated. The two went to the library to look up and discovered that on Mark's 6th birthday, he had witnessed his father being burned alive. Therefore, Mark became isolated and was misunderstood by his friends as a psychopath. After knowing the truth, Becky went to the store to find Mark. But at this time, Mark and his brother were being chased by monsters. In the moment of danger, Thomas was caught by the monster's leg and fell to the ground. Thomas shouted at Mark to run away immediately and not look back. Seeing the monster rushing towards him, Mark could only run away. Mark hid behind a large tree and picked up a rock on the ground and prayed that he could return home. But when Mark opened his eyes, he only saw that the monster was getting closer. In his excitement, Mark accidentally injured Becky. Memo heard the noise and ran over. Memo wondered how Mark could appear so suddenly. Mark didn't know how to explain. When questioned by the two, Mark had to tell the truth. However, they thought that Mark was just under too much pressure and temporarily lost his mind, so they decided to pretend to believe him. To prove that what he said was true, Mark led the two to the secret base to show them the destroyed demon statue. After that, Mark also led them to his father's secret base. But when they entered the large space that was once a small attic, Becky was disappointed and left. She also advised Mark to continue psychological treatment. Looking at the expressions of the two, Mark knew that they did not believe him. This caused Mark to explode with emotion. After the two left, Mark frantically punched the statue, causing the ground in the Black Tower to shake violently. Each punch of Mark was a tremor, and even the wall that sealed the demons cracked. The Demon King knew that the time to rescue their ancestors had come. Mark did not know that he was the key to this problem. When he calmed down, Mark begged the angel statue to help save his brother, but the statue remained motionless. Just when Mark was most disappointed, a miracle happened. Suddenly, the stone statue spoke encouragingly. This made Mark more confident in his beliefs. Mark went to Memo again and asked Memo to help him find Tamat. However, Memo thought Mark had gone crazy. But after some emotional begging from Mark, Memo changed his mind. Mark then followed the notes in the notebook and found a hidden gate in the church. Following the instructions in the notebook, Mark pressed the mechanisms one by one, and with the sound of gears, the stone door leading to the Black Tower opened. Memo could not believe it. Memo stepped inside and immediately realized that not only did he no longer need to eat or drink, but the wound on his leg had also completely healed. However, while the two were still happy, the door connecting the two worlds suddenly closed, and no matter how hard they tried, they could not open it anymore. Memo was a bit confused and asked how to get back, but saw that Mark had closed his eyes. Immediately after that, Mark disappeared, leaving only Memo with a confused and worried expression. The monster's roar continuously echoed in the surrounding space, causing this god to cry out in despair. Mark was still talking to Memo, but when he opened his eyes, he realized that he had returned home. Mark had left Memo in another world. Mark hurriedly opened the notebook and tried to find a way back, but his mother suddenly appeared and interrupted. Looking at the strange book on the bed, she felt that her son was like her husband, suffering from paranoia. Because she could not get the notebook back, Mark's mother could only lock the door and lock Mark in the room. However, in his anxiety, Mark's emotions exploded, causing the ground inside the Black Tower to shake violently. The wall that sealed the monster quickly collapsed. Not long after, a large pit appeared. The Demon King entered and spoke strange languages toward the inside, and it seemed that in the depths of the darkness, something responded to the Demon King's request. Very quickly, a man in white appeared. Just as he sat on the throne, a giant claw suddenly pierced through the gap in the wooden throne. The sharp nails pierced the man's body. After that, he seemed to have become a completely different person than before. This was the bodyguard, and also Griffin's loyal henchman. In front of the astonished eyes of the Demon King, the bodyguard introduced himself as Baron. On the other side, Mark's mother called the psychologist and said that Mark was angry, so she locked him in the room. However, the doctor advised her to let Mark out. With no other choice, Mark's mother let Mark out. Mark hurriedly rushed to the church, then opened the gate leading to the Black Tower. However, Memo was no longer there. He only found a wooden sign. Mark took it and quickly ran out. On it was a message from Memo saying that he would not go too far. In order to find Memo, Mark brought all the items that could be used in case of need. Mark then left a method to open the portal and sent it to Becky for safekeeping. At the same time, Mark explained that if he couldn't find Memo, she should give this notebook to his mother. That way, they would be able to open the portal and save both Mark and Memo. Looking at the notebook on the table, Becky was a bit skeptical and didn't know if the Black Tower really existed. At this time, Mark had gone deep inside the light tower. He turned on the music from the speaker, hoping to find Memo. However, the noise was too loud and attracted monsters. Before Mark could react, he was discovered. A group of monsters chased him, forcing Mark to run away. When Mark reached the end of the road, a mysterious person appeared behind him and asked Mark to keep quiet. Then, this person took out a fish, smeared the slime on Mark's face and the surrounding plants. The fishy smell dulls the monster's sense of smell, causing them to lose track of Mark. They were helpless and had to retreat. When he went outside, the hidden man took off his hat. The person who saved Mark was none other than Memo. However, in just one day, Memo had grown a very long beard. Memo also did not hide that he had been here for 3 weeks. The two of them then realized that the speed of time in the Black Tower was much faster than outside. That means if Becky opened the portal tomorrow, it would be 3 weeks later. Therefore, Mark and Memo decided to observe the situation inside the Black Tower first. At this time, Becky was still wondering whether to give the notebook to Mark's mother or not. She opened the notebook and realized that she should trust her friend. But first, she needed to do an experiment to prove the existence of monsters. Therefore, Becky, Sarah and Ben returned home. Following the instructions in the notebook, the three of them decided to revive a monster inside the book. The method is very simple. Just sprinkle 5 drops of water on the wilted flower, and when the monster appears, they can use salt to kill it. However, after they sprinkle water on the flower, nothing exists. But Becky does not want to give up. She decides to open the portal. Although she is not willing, Sarah still decides to support Becky. Before leaving, Ben puts the flower in a cup of water. Then the three of them follow the map to find the portal deep in the church. According to the letter left by Mark, Becky pressed the mechanisms. But when Becky pressed the last mechanism, the portal did not open, but only flowed out a stream of water below. Becky tried again, but the result was still the same. This made Becky feel that Mark was teasing her intelligence. But inside the Black Tower, Mark and Memo discovered the messenger's slave team. The monster was controlling people to transport giant rocks. No one knew where they would be taken. At this time, Mark saw Thomas being enslaved. Memo was about to go up to save them, but a monster discovered them. Very quickly, the monsters began to chase the two. However, that was not the scariest thing. The scariest thing was that Mark and Memo ran to the edge of the cliff. Seeing the monster about to attack, Memo pulled Mark down. At this time, the 3 people in Becky's group had just left the church when they were discovered by the police. But they did not know that the strange flower had awakened and the monster was about to bloom. Mark and Memo jumped down the deep cliff without any protection. But fortunately, they fell on the bed at Mark's house. The next day, the two planned to return to the Black Tower to save Thomas, who was being enslaved. However, they did not know that a greater danger was about to strike. When they learned that Mark and Memo had escaped, Baron coldly killed the leader and then gently chose a new successor. It seemed that for this guardian, whether the other group existed or not was not too important. Back at home, Becky looked at the notebook, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, a scream rang out. She discovered that the withered flower had revived and the stem was still full of mucus. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and Becky's father appeared. He came to warn her that she was not allowed to enter any place without permission, especially the church, and she was not allowed to continue contacting Mark because she could not find evidence of the existence of another world. Becky gave the notebook to her father. To calm her down, she started listening to her favorite music. But suddenly, a monster climbed onto Becky's body and entered her mouth, making it impossible for her to breathe. In the emergency, Becky ran into the kitchen, took out the tools to remove the monster. Then she threw it in the trash and used salt to kill the monster. After narrowly escaping death, Becky finally realized that what Mark said was true. She took the notebook that she had given to her father and intended to give it to Mark's mother so that they could prove the existence of the Black Tower. At this time, Mark was preparing to go to the Black Tower, but his mother stopped him. Just then, a car appeared and doctors in white robes came out of the car. They were the psychiatrists who had taken Mark's brother away before. Mark realized that his mother also intended to send him to a mental hospital. In order to save his brother, Mark immediately struggled with the doctor. When Mark was about to be injected with anesthesia, he threw a punch and knocked down a doctor. Mark then quickly climbed to the roof to escape. Mark quickly ran to the church and met Memo again. They thought they had escaped, but the doctor continued to chase after them. They quickly subdued Memo. When Mark was about to be anesthetized, a mysterious person appeared and kicked the other person away while knocking down the other two doctors and coming before the head doctor. Then this person beat him very hard. It seemed like they had an unresolved grudge. Mark and Memo took the opportunity to run into the Black Tower. When the mysterious person came out, Mark's mother saw him, and the mysterious person was her son, Mark. But did Mark enter the Black Tower? The police quickly arrived, and the psychiatrist was also notified. When Peter entered the church, he found that the doctors had all been killed. The reason the police called the psychiatrist was to confirm whether Mark would attack or not. Surprisingly, Peter confirmed that Mark would do so, but a psychiatrist should not lie. Mark and Memo walked for a long time in the Black Tower. When it was getting dark, Memo decided to rest at the foot of the mountain. When they were setting up camp, a drop of water fell from the sky. Memo stood up in fear and saw that it was starting to rain heavily. Memo shouted for them to leave quickly. It turned out that this place was full of strange flowers like Becky's house. When they met water, monsters would bloom. Very quickly, countless monsters rushed over. The two people were scared and climbed up a hill. Fortunately, the monsters seemed to have no intelligence, so they couldn't climb. So they also escaped a disaster. The next morning, the monsters without water had turned into rotten corpses. Mark and Memo continued their journey. The man took off his coat to reveal a hoodie inside. It was just the clothes Mark wore when he attacked the doctor. So who is this Dr. Peter? In the Black Tower, a mysterious person wearing a cloak walked towards the castle. The monsters guarding the door tried to stop him, but the mysterious person turned into a pile of dry leaves and crawled through the main door. The leader immediately realized what was happening and smeared black mucus under his nose. Then the leader also raised his voice and said that since he had come here, why didn't he dare to show himself? The mysterious person immediately appeared before everyone's eyes. Griffin also controlled his guardian spirit. The wizard immediately bowed and reported that the time travelers had arrived at the Black Tower and everything was going according to plan. At this time, Mark and Memo were setting up the mechanism to prepare for the slave team to appear to rescue Thomas. While the two were resting, a mosquito bit him and quickly flew away. The wizard caught the mosquito and crushed it before putting it in his mouth. The wizard then reported to the guardian spirit that Mark and Memo had set up a base by the lake to prepare to rescue Thomas. After hearing the report, the leader immediately ordered to capture them. However, a look from the guardian spirit made the leader not dare to say anything more. He then ordered the wizard to inform the spy in the human world to resolve all the trouble. In the real world, a delivery man went to Becky's father to deliver the guardian spirit's order. It turned out that Peter was a spy hiding in the human world. Soon after, he entered his daughter's room and found that Becky was not there. Peter quickly took out a vacuum cleaner to clean up and emptied the bag of hair and ate it greedily. While chewing, he saw everything Becky had experienced. Peter panicked and got in the car to prepare to find his daughter. He was afraid that she would ruin the guardian angel's plan. In his haste, Peter revealed his true identity. It turned out that he was also a faceless magician. This morning, Becky went to Mark's mother to explain that the Black Tower was real, and she also showed a lot of evidence to the police and Mark's mother. However, Katharina did not believe it at all. Becky wanted to show the notebook to prove it, but she found that the notebook was not there. Becky hurriedly went to Sarah to ask, and learned that the notebook had fallen on Ben's car. However, Sarah was forbidden from going out by her parents, so she couldn't leave the house. Becky had no choice but to go find the notebook at the party. The police and Katharina also followed, but they didn't know that a great disaster was about to happen to them. In the Black Tower, Memo and Mark were still unaware of the impending danger. They were training him in time travel skills. Fortunately, with hard training, Mark successfully mastered the technique of traveling back and forth between the two worlds smoothly. In the middle of the night, when Mark was sleeping soundly, he heard a strange noise outside. Mark went out to check and was surprised to see his deceased father. Everything appeared too real, but when Memo heard the noise and ran over, there was nothing there. Memo thought Mark was just having a nightmare, but Mark insisted that what he saw was definitely his father. Mark also burned himself with the bracelet, but there was nothing on Mark's wrist. Seeing that Memo didn't believe him, Mark angrily left. Their relationship seemed to have fallen into a crisis. Elsewhere, Becky finally found the notebook at the party, but it was wet. When she opened it, the evil flower had bloomed with mucus. Becky realized the danger and quickly took salt to follow the trail to search. However, before she could find it, the monster attacked her friends. Ben saw the horrifying scene and hid in a box in fear. When Becky arrived, she only saw Maya dying. Becky tried to save her, but at that moment Peter approached her in anger. With just one look, Becky lost control and followed her father away. At the party, the police chief and Katharina were waiting for Becky. Suddenly, a person flew up and rushed towards the two. Immediately, the scene became chaotic. The sheriff and Katharina were terrified when they saw a monster killing indiscriminately. The sheriff immediately drew his weapon and shot, but this only made the monster even angrier. It angrily charged at the sheriff. Immediately, the monster pushed the sheriff to the ground, and the weapon in his hand fell. Just as the sheriff was about to be killed, Katharina picked up the weapon and shot the monster repeatedly and defeated it. The two survivors of the accident were both terrified. At this time, Peter brought Becky along. After a glance, when Katharina and the sheriff looked back, they realized that the attacker had turned into a grizzly bear. Meanwhile, in the Black Tower, because Mark and Memo had argued yesterday, when Mark woke up, he intended to find Memo to reconcile. But for some reason, they argued even more. Mark angrily punched Memo down and began to attack fiercely. The monster castle began to move. Everything was starting to go according to plan. At this time, Memo went back and saw Mark beating someone. When Memo came closer to examine, he discovered that the person being beaten was himself. As soon as Mark reached out, the fake Memo had disappeared. At this time, more footprints appeared on the beach. Mark frantically pointed in that direction for Memo to see. Memo hurriedly took out his crossbow and threw it forward, and suddenly a monster fainted on the ground. The two tied it up and questioned its origin. The monster first transformed into Memo's father to ask for help, then transformed into Mark's father. Seeing it do so, Mark immediately lit a fire under it. The painful monster could only say that it was a magician. It could read other people's thoughts and change shape at will. Mark wanted to ask more, but the monster had disappeared. Seeing the situation, Mark poured gasoline around and prepared a lighter. The magician quickly appeared and told everything, claiming to be a member of the Guardian Spirit Group. Memo immediately realized that the two had been discovered, so they had to leave quickly. When the monsters arrived, there was only an empty house left. One monster suggested chasing them, but the captain ordered a retreat because he knew Mark would definitely follow them. Sure enough, the two pursued them to the place where Thomas was being held and found the quarry. But there were so many people that they couldn't tell who was Thomas. So the two came up with a brilliant idea. They used a tape recorder to play music. Thomas heard it and immediately recognized Mark coming to save him. Thomas raised his hand to signal, but was knocked unconscious and dragged into the quarry. Memo suggested saving Thomas now, but Mark said that in order to get through that place, they had to know what was inside. So Mark decided to act at night. But the two didn't know that a trap was waiting for them ahead. Elsewhere, the police chief came to Katharina and said that they had seen the monster, but now it had turned into a grizzly bear. Both of them felt that something was wrong. The police chief remembered the past. He was the policeman who had witnessed Mark's father burned to death. But when the fire was put out, they couldn't find his body, not even a skeleton. The strange thing was that all the relevant information had been erased by the prosecutor. The police chief was about to argue with the prosecutor, but he found out that the prosecutor was a monster. The police chief then asked his colleagues, but no one remembered the prosecutor. If all of this was not a coincidence, then what they saw tonight was true. This made Katharina realize that her son might not be crazy. They rushed to Peter's house and brought the notebook and went to the church. The three of them went to the basement to open the portal, but Becky said that after pressing the last mechanism, only water came out. Meanwhile, in the Black Tower, Memo threw rocks to make noise to attract the monster's attention. Mark took the opportunity to move in to find rocks. However, the monsters were waiting to attack them. When Mark freed Thomas, the mechanism was activated and the door immediately closed. Thomas took out the holy relic and said that this was a plot of the Guardian Spirit Group. But Mark was not too worried. Mark prepared to use his ability to move to take Thomas away, but the supernatural power was disabled. It turned out that the monster had smeared asphalt on the wall to block the ability of the people to move. The two were completely trapped here, but Mark still did not give up. Mark took out the holy relic and threw it at the cliff. Immediately, the cave shattered, creating a large hole. The two escaped, but a monster was secretly following them. When it was about to attack the two, Memo reminded Mark, so Mark threw out the holy weapon and destroyed the monster in an instant. Memo was seriously injured when he returned. Since his mobility was no longer effective, Mark had to lead the two back to the portal, hoping someone would open the door. The leader reported their escape to the Guardian group. This made Griffin extremely angry. He grabbed his representative and walked out of the cave to chase after Mark and the others, chasing Mark and the remaining people. When Griffin landed, he immediately captured Mark. Mark was about to fight angrily when his father suddenly appeared in his mind. His father told Mark to calm down because Griffin lived by swallowing hatred. Only when Mark gave up hatred could he defeat Griffin. Only then could Mark save Thomas. Hearing that, Mark let go of the holy weapon in his hand and prepared to lead Memo away. Meanwhile, Katharina understood her son's message, so she pressed the mechanism and opened the portal. Becky had just entered when she saw Griffin rising up in anger. After receiving encouragement from his father, Mark threw the holy weapon and hit Griffin's arm. Thomas was successfully saved. When everyone was about to leave, Griffin attacked them again. Fortunately, he could not break the gate. At the most important moment, Katharina closed the portal. Everyone was successfully saved. And finally, Katharina realized that she was wrong to misunderstand her children and sincerely apologized. After everything ended, Mark locked the family heirloom. Suddenly, Ben appeared and stole the method to find the Black Tower. In order to save his lover Maya, who was in a coma, he brought the holy weapon into the Black Tower, hoping that the mysterious power of this place could help her wake up. On the other side, the delivery man found Peter trying to escape, so Peter ordered him to stop the mission. As soon as he finished speaking, Peter was killed and transformed back into his true form. In a secret room deep in the church, the giant 3 base stones were shattered. A monster broke through the shell, signaling that Griffin's revenge was about to come. The video ends here. If you find it interesting, please leave a like and a subscribe to support us. Goodbye, and see you all in the next videos.